you're a home buyer, somebody or a young person looking to buy a home, you need a bit of a reset.
There is a possibility on the other side of this that inflation could actually be quite low.
Today I have with us Brian Stevens. This man is an absolute genius. If you guys want more information on Brian, go to his YouTube channel, The National Real Estate Post. In addition to that, he also has a website called Mortgage Shots. The reason I love Brian, and I've been talking back and forth with Brian, I don't know Brian for who knows, man, 8 months, but I generally listen to Brian's podcast. He has a very, kind of a neutral standpoint when it comes to real estate. He has his fingers to the pulse, and he's been a loan officer longer than me. So it's the first guest I've had on my channel, Brian, that's been a loan officer longer than me. You've been a loan officer for how long? Since 1989, did you say?
No, 1998.
1998. Okay, still longer than me, but I thought you said 89. Still a long time. So you guys, I have Brian here just to give us some more perspective on what's happening in the real estate market. So Brian, I have some questions, brother, but before I begin, do you want to say anything?
Well, that was my dyslexia getting the better of me. It's definitely 1998. It's not 1989. No, there's really nothing in particular. Listen, I'm just here. I'd like to look at real estate. I enjoy looking at mortgage lending. I think I have a critical mind, and I ask a lot of questions. And getting out and speaking with real estate agents and loan officers is something I enjoy doing. I see myself more as an advocate for agents than I do for an advocate necessarily the industry. I want to make sure that agents, not necessarily their companies, are the ones that are getting ahead, and they're equipped with all the information that we can provide for them so they can make informed decisions.
If you guys go back to his YouTube channel, I mean, he's done 1,700 videos. How long have you been doing videos, man?
I've been at this for 17 years. So we started using YouTube when nobody knew what it was. I say this, when we shot our first couple of videos and we were using it, me and a partner at the time were using it as a means of staying in touch with local real estate agents. Nobody even knew what the whole term viral was. As I said, people thought at that time that viral was something that required topical creams to fix. We honestly didn't understand it. And so we've been around kind of since the inception. We started doing privately hosted videos for a lot, but yeah, it's been a long time. And I've written a show every day for 17 years. I've said I've literally written War and Peace over 10 times over the past near to 2 decades.
Yeah, and I really do enjoy your videos, the amount of effort and detail you put into it. So Brian, let's start here, if I may. And I always like to ask my guests, their definition of what they believe a housing market crash is. I think that you see as well as an industry. A lot of people don't really have a definition of what is a crash. What is not a crash? A lot of people use it, throw it around like it's, loosely to kind of push a narrative. At least that's what I notice in my market. So I always like to let the viewers know who we're talking about. Some people have very simple explanations. Some people more complicated. So what is your definition, Brian, of what a housing market crash actually is?
Well, that's an interesting question there. I guess it's I see it a little bit more subjectively. As I said a couple of moments ago, I try to come from the position as an advocate for a loan officer or a real estate agent. And I can firmly say this, for some real estate agents and lenders, they never saw a real estate crash because they found a way to succeed through difficult markets. In fact, in 2009, when I was writing loans, it was the best year that I ever had writing loans. But I had a lot of motivation. I found out I was having a kid. I actually found out I was having a kid when I was dead broke after I lost my house. I mean, I was broke right after Christmas. I was leaving Arizona. I was off of this place called Apache Junction Road, out in the middle of nowhere on Christmas.
Bro, no. Is there a resort and casino right there?
Yeah.
I stayed there because I was about to pass out. I was driving from Surprise, Arizona to El Paso. Mm-hmm. And it goes through the mountains and I just couldn't see anymore. And I'm like, I got to stop driving. So I pulled over and there's an Apache casino right there.
Yeah.
What a small world.
It's crazy. So I was driving back and my brother-in-law, my jerk-off brother-in-law told me, don't go through LA, go through Las Vegas. So I'm driving back with my 2 young kids and I found myself stuck behind Hoover Dam in Las Vegas on New Year's Eve, dead broke. And I was thinking, my God. So I called my wife who had to fly home because she had to go back to work. And I said, well, how are you doing? Did you make it home okay? I've got my 2 kids fighting like cats and dogs. I've been on the road for 20 hours, broke, losing my mind. And she goes, yeah, I made it home, but I'm pregnant. And I'm like, whoa, this is really not good. So it was literally on New Year's Eve in downtown Las Vegas with two fighting kids broke when I changed my business around. Then I started focusing on different types of scripting. And when I did that, I was cold calling and warm calling, and for refis, for cash out, for debt consolidation, for negam deals, for interest only deals, for good credit, bad credit, you name it. I had every list, and you could get them from title companies at the time. And I finally found a script that worked. And I was getting like a 50% conversion rate because see, back then during that crash, and I would say that's a crash, back in 2008 in that crash, what we had is we had an abundance of inventory and we had absolutely no demand. And this crash that we're in right now, and we are in fact in a crash, and this one's going to get worse, we have the exact opposite of that one, don't we? We have no inventory and an abundance of demand. Those were all written on bad loans back then. These are all written on really great loans today. But I found a way to make a script to get my way through that crash. So I never really had one. So subjectively, a crash is what you make it or what you choose not to make it. Objectively, a crash is where I think you're going to see losing 30% or more of whatever the expected production is for the industry. So what makes this one interesting, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds on it, and I think why so many realtors and lenders are having such a hard time with where we're at right now is we've never seen such a swing. Now, we deal with superlatives a lot in this industry, but we went from the greatest market that we'd ever seen where we were putting $7 trillion through a hose that was intended to do about $4 trillion worth of work. Companies, they staffed up, they got big, and everyone was writing loans, and loan officers began to think that deals were just falling off trees. I said back then, just a couple of years ago, that it was like taking tickets at a deli. I mean, you were making pastrami sandwiches, you weren't doing loans. And it's almost unfair to people at that time, or it's almost unfair for those loan officers to have to go from that market of incredible abundance to go to this market of extreme scarcity. Again, in a superlative fashion, we went from the absolute best market to the absolute worst market. It's the hot to cold kind of boiling a frog scenario. And a lot of this industry right now is dying as a result of that. So the crash, what we're seeing right now is not only with the industry, the crash is not only with the market, but the crash is also within the industry. So, for instance, we have 1.51 million real estate agents right now. We lost 38,000 real estate agents since January alone and 64,000 real estate agents since October. And these numbers are going to increase. So the crash, subjectively and objectively, I'd say somewhere around 30%. Subjectively, that's an entirely different story and an interesting one that's unfolding right before our eyes because I'll tell you right now, man, we are not yet done. As Frank Sinatra saying, the best is yet to come.
You know, I had someone ask me right before I started this podcast in my Discord group, Brian. They're like, "What are your characteristics? What do you want to see when you podcast someone?" And all I said was the ability to talk about hard things without emotion. That's it. That's all I need. And the way you broke that down, man, I mean, we're very similar. I really, really respect how you said that. Basically, if we were just to narrow our sights down to like just the price, 30% roughly would be the price decline. And I also like how you were talking about kind of, different circumstances versus the GFC, you're saying basically right now demand is high, but what's interesting is when we analyze what you just said about demand being high right now, it's actually low. And we see that in the transactions, but there's a but. It's artificially low. Correct. It's artificially low because in a matter of months, the Federal Reserve flipped a switch and made it unaffordable for like 50% of Americans. But by design. By design. But likewise, here's what's interesting, man. If we look at the low interest rates, you can also say that the high demand was also pulled forward. Because if the rates are now 2 and 3%, the people that were going to purchase in 2 years are now purchasing during the low interest rates. So there's a lot going on. I also think there's a transaction crash going on. That's why we're losing the realtors. And you know what I loved, man? I loved, and I hope the viewers see why I brought you on here, is one of the reasons why so many professionals, we're not even talking about consumers now, are getting this wrong, because during the GFC, it didn't happen like this. During the GFC, there was a couple blips in 2006 and 2007 where home prices went down based on Case-Shiller or median home sales price. It went down, but it rebounded a little, and then it kind of went sideways and then went down. But right now, but what I'm saying is it went together. It was more uniform. Right now, we have deep splinters happening around the nation. And not only do we have these deep splinters, some markets did rebound. Some markets rebound like crazy. They were down 10%. Now they're up 10%. It's like, what the hell is going on? We've never seen anything like this. Anaheim's up, according to Redfin, 13%.
Yeah.
San Antonio's down 5%. So then, and that's why I love listening to you. So then I start, as someone's been in the business so long, trying to figure this out, like why? Like what is happening? Why is some places down, other places up? So can you talk about, Brian, what you think the biggest factor in the industry is right now? Like what is leading to the price decline? What is leading to the agents leaving the business?
Yeah.
What's leading the markets right now?
To your first point, I want to bring that point up. We've always had splintered markets. And, even in my small town of Vacaville, where we have 100,000 people, there are 5 or 6 different markets inside of Vacaville alone, if you're to look at it close enough. When you're looking like these broad sprawling areas like Southern California or Houston, where they truly are sprawl, or, the Phoenix Valley, they truly are sprawl. There's literally hundreds of different markets in there. And what I find fascinating is how so many people who are so damn smart could be so damn stupid. And here's an example. And this is twofold. The first one is Zillow, when they decided that they were no longer going to be essentially an advertising and sales platform, they were going to turn into a real estate platform. After all, they know technology, so they might as well be opening people's heads up and doing brain surgery, right? But one of the things they did, and why so many people shorted their stock when they made this move, is Zillow had built everything based on an algorithm that said that the market in the United States is entirely uniform, that the bad foundations that you have down in half of Dallas and DFW is the same market that you're going to have outside of Chicago, where you have entire regions that were built with, faulty Chinese sheetrock and everything in between. And for those who knew that we didn't have one uniform market, said, my God, I can't believe that we're going down this road. Yet they raised billions and billions of dollars, and they went head to head to real estate agents. And I sat back and laughed. I said, oh my God, this thing's going to crash and burn. And it did.
Yep.
We are so dependent on algorithms that don't have the flexibility necessary. Maybe with AI, this is going to change now, but they didn't have the flexibility that was necessary in order to really determine values, because markets are different, not only within a city, a state, but a parish, a county, whatever it is, but even in the communities that we live around. What we did then is the GSEs, Fannie, Freddie, and even HUD to a certain extent with Jenny, they tried to go down this road about 4 or 5 years ago, where they were trying to get rid of, everyone wants to automate everything. They said, okay, we're going to get rid of the appraiser out there because we can find algorithms that are going to work better. What they did is they took the same approach Zillow did, and they already had a roadmap that proved that this whole thing was going to fail. And so, and if you notice this, about a year ago, we started attacking our appraisers across the country. All of a sudden, they couldn't do appraisals. All of a sudden, their biases were coming to the table. Well, these biases weren't there for the last 25 years of their career, but right now, they cannot objectively go in and give a value. And the truth is, the only way to really get a value is to go and have an individual go in there, because you don't know what's going on in these houses. Again, between the two crashes, do you remember back in 2008 when people were getting foreclosed on? They were taking, Quikrete and cement, and they were flushing them down their toilets and putting them down their drains. You don't know the condition of these houses unless you actually have somebody going in there. So to that respect, when we're looking at having one uniform market and how things are splintered and fractured right now, I think they've kind of always been that way.
Yeah. Let me respond real quick to that, because I remember the original question, but you brought back a point that I was making, which is incredibly important. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but
sure.
I just want to do it for my viewers, because I've been preaching this exact thing that you're saying. I've been banging my drums like, hey, it's about subdivision. A subdivision is an individual ecosystem of a subject property. You cannot compare like it's several markets within the metros and then the cities and then even in the areas and the zip codes. It's subdivision unless it's rural. But subdivision, man, you got to stay in the subdivision. You may have a water park in this subdivision, but the subdivision across the street may have a meth park.
Right.
So and then how they're not even inspecting the comps. They're taking pictures off ML. They're not. So there are loopholes. I just want to say, keep going, brother, because my viewers are right there with you.
Yeah, it's. I saw another one where they had for example, it was down in Lower Manhattan where there's a Jewish community and there was a synagogue, And the closer you were to that synagogue, the more expensive the properties were. But there was a point where that community ended. And on the other side of the road was a different community. And what you found was this property is going for X and this one's going, on the other side of the road. Once you left that community was going at 30% X. Well, you can't use that as a comp. We have a fundamentally and drastically different community, and it's separated literally by one road. And these are things, like I said, maybe AI could deal with it, but having these set in stone algorithms aren't going to work. With respect to what's going to affect the market right now, it's one thing and one thing only. It's inventory. That's it. That's it. It's all inventory.
Okay.
With inventory, see, the problem is it's not affordability. With enough inventory, price and demand is going to start to level out, and we'll find a happy ground where affordability comes down as inventory rises. Right now, today, I'm going to give you a couple of points here. So when we look at new housing starts are basically exactly where they are today, where they were back in 1959. Okay, so if you look at like the St. Louis Fed graph of housing starts, it's right here and it's right here. And if we look at between it's really kind of the median, where half the years our starts are higher than that point and half the year starts are lower than that point. So it kind of makes sense. The difference is back in 1959, we had a population density of 177 million people. Right now we have 340 million people. So we have twice as many people living in the United States, and we are building the exact same starts as if it was back in 1959 when we had 177 million. So that's kind of problematic there. Housing starts are a huge issue. The other one is a lot of our cities right now are rezoning what would otherwise be single family residence plots, and they're turning them into high-rise affordable condos. The problem with that is pretty easy for me to see, is that allows large corporations to go ahead and take the equity that the middle-class individual would otherwise be getting. And why our communities are doing this, I think, is by design, but I also think that the moon is a spaceship, and and all the other good stuff going on out there. Now, if we don't have more inventory and we have pent-up demand, and rates go down by 3%, let's say we go down to 1%, let's say rates go down to 0%, let's say rates go down to -%, it doesn't matter. Negative wouldn't do it, but if we went down to a 0% rate, it wouldn't change anything, because we would bid home prices up to the point where your maximum payment as it pertains to your debt to income ratios is going to be. So we're trying to find solutions to the unaffordability problems that we have right now. And one of them is, let's do 40-year loans. You're probably seeing interest-only loans are coming back. And these are all great deals. But the truth is, without the inventory, it doesn't matter. In Japan, back in the 1980s, Tokyo was the most expensive real estate in the world. So Japan came out with a 100-year loan. And they were doing that as a means of trying to drive prices or drive affordability down, where payments would be reasonable, and people and your middle class folks could go ahead and buy houses. We're looking back, we have studies on that 40 years later, and it absolutely didn't work. The scenario that I just laid out for you is going to happen here, because we have a precedence that already took place some 44 years ago. So right now, the biggest issue that we're facing is going to be inventory. It's affecting values. It's going to affect production and the number of real estate agents and lenders to stay in this business. Now, my own personal perspective is I think a certain level of attrition as a result of the lack of inventory is a really good thing for the real estate industry, because what we need to do is we need to cull the herds. We have too many real estate agents. We have too many part-time agents. And what they're doing is, reputationally, they're hurting the brand altogether. If you go and look at what's taking place with this lawsuit over in Missouri. Now, I've done a number of interviews with Dave Stevens, the past president of the Mortgage Bankers Association and the president of the FHA. He was called as the expert witness on that case, and the expert witness for all the other cases that were cropping up around there. And I was talking with him about it, and I said, well, what do you think about this whole thing? He goes, one, they got it wrong. This whole thing is going to get overturned. That's another one. But he said the jury didn't even deliberate for more than about a half hour. They literally went in.
Wow.
They took bad information. They took bad information. This whole thing was already shot down in Illinois. It was already dropped by the DOJ. And they came back with a verdict of guilty. Now, why did they do that? Well, I think they came back with a verdict of guilty not because the model that the National Association of Realtors and Multiple Listing System and all these brokerages have put together with commissions. No, not at all. I think what it is I think these folks are looking at, I think the jury was looking at it and saying, oh, real estate agents, yes, they're not worth what they do. They're not worth what they get. And we're going to indict them and find them guilty based on what their reputation is. So
Okay.
I think what's taking place right now with the market is going to get rid of more agents. I mean, seriously, if we lost 60,000 agents, if we lost 600,000 agents, answer me this question. Would it make a damn bit of difference to the person who's buying or selling a house on the street? And frankly, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, guys, because every great real estate agent agrees with me on this one. If we lost 600,000 agents, what I think would happen is the reputation and opinion of real estate agents would actually improve, because you would be left with those who look at this job as a profession, and that's where we need to be.
Okay. You covered a lot of stuff. Let me recap on a few things that you said. So back to the original question, the leading factor in the market right now, a lot of people are saying affordability. I would probably lean towards affordability, or even migration. Migration is a huge thing right now, but you chose inventory and you explained why, and I definitely appreciate that. And if we go to the metro, some of the leading price decline metro areas, they have inventory. In fact, the 3 metros, according to Redfin, that have more inventory than pre-pandemic is on the year-over-year price decline list. One of them is in Florida. San Francisco's the other. I think Austin's the third. I think it's Lakeview, Florida is the other one. They're down massively. Then you got Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana. Oh my God, that's down massively, but it's splintered. It's very hard to get the read. But you're saying inventory, great answer. You explained. Rezoning is making that difficult, except in places like Texas that almost has no zoning issues. My God, we need some zoning regulation here. Maybe. Consumer spending habits are a reason.
Yeah.
You could say migration. You could say the money printing, the propping up, all these things. You also warn the viewers that something that we don't want to see is kind of we want to see prices go down, obviously with the inventory going up. But what happened in, I think you said Japan, is they were just trying to affect the payment. It didn't work. They were offering 40-year loans, 100-year loans. 100-year loan is like interest only. So it's basically the interest-only loan, 100-year loans. So great stuff there. You're talking about the starts. I appreciated that. I'm going to get into new homes here in a second. But one of the things with the commission lawsuit, it blew my mind that you said is basically America hates realtors and they think they make too much money. And there's a horrible reputation for good reason. If you're a good realtor, you got to deal with bad realtors, and most of them are bad. But does that mean there's not great realtors? No, there are great realtors. It's rare, in my opinion. We need the industry to step up. If we lose 600,000 agents, that's good for consumers, in my opinion. Demand's on the sideline. Demand is artificially crushed right now. But not just because of interest rate. Yes, interest rates matter, but also the price. In what ways, Brian, do you see inventory going up, or do you think that it's going to start going down? How do you see the whole lack of inventory thing playing out overall?
Okay, I think things are going to get better in spring. Not just because it's spring and that's traditionally the best market, but right now we're starting to see new home completions are actually on the rise, and we're bucking the trend a little bit right now. So that's going to be somewhat helpful. The other thing that I find interesting, and let me just see if I can find this here real quickly for you. When we look at late delinquent payments on loans right now. So back in 2008, our FHA delinquencies were sitting at 14.2%. Okay. Today, our FHA delinquencies are sitting at 10.8%. So, 4% somewhere in there is the difference between, 4% is the difference between the two, the variance here, but we're about 25% fewer delinquencies, 25 to 30% fewer delinquencies on our FHA deals than we were during the last big meltdown. Now, those delinquencies, a lot of people are looking at as they were foreshadowing what was going to take place. And, we saw subsequently a few months later, I remember being in Sacramento and looking at this new home subdivision. They built a city out in the middle of nowhere, and every house was for sale. It was crazy, right, with what we had with our inventory. Well, if we're going to say that if that was a precursor to the inventory increases that we saw during the last meltdown, and we're sitting 25 to 30% lower today, well, that would lead me to believe that we're also going to see more inventory as a result of those late payments turning into foreclosures, provided we don't come out with a horrible policy on forbearances again. So the nature of our late payments and future foreclosures is going to actually be helpful for our business. You're going to get people back in these houses who are actually paying the property taxes, which is also going to help communities. And it's going to create listings, and it's going to create lending opportunities for those people who need to borrow somebody else's money. So I think that's going to be a big one. It's not going to be 25% less, but it certainly is going to be an uptick. Along with our completions right now, that's going to help. The other one, and I don't want to be too macabre about this, because at my age right now, my mom is one of the older baby boomers out there, and I love my mom as much as anybody else loves their mom, right? And I want her to be around and be healthy and happy forever. But the truth of the matter is that by far the largest and richest group generation of real estate owners are baby boomers, and they're starting to come to the end of the tracks. And through attrition and life expectancy numbers, we know that all those properties are also going to be coming available again. So come this spring, I think we're going to see an uptick from a few different areas, and that should help us. The other thing is that we are in an election cycle, an election year right now. And listen, I'm with you. Unaffordability is the biggest problem we have. It's a result of lack of inventory, in my estimation. But I think what's happening right now is our politicians are going to have to address this issue. Unaffordability in housing right now, I think, is the biggest issue our country is facing, inside or outside of real estate. So I think we're going to find a lot more conversations on this, and a lot of more potential solutions coming out of it. Again, call to action for realtors and lenders. I think getting involved in especially your local elections, what's happening in your community, your state, or your county, those are going to be the important issues for you to find out what's going on with zoning. But if we're going to start to talk about this on a national level because it's an election year, I think that's super, super important.
You're seeing inventory. In your opinion, we're going to have inventory obviously start coming up again in spring, like usual, and a lot of that is going to be coming from new homes. There's going to be some coming from boomers who are aging out, from defaults, people that can no longer afford home ownership. But one thing you didn't cover, man, that seems to be all over the media right now, this is why we don't have inventory, is the golden handcuff effect. Can you talk about how you see that whole golden handcuff effect, where people have like 3% so they won't sell? Can you talk about how you see that changing going into the future?
The rates that we have right now?
No. I'm talking about the home. Have you heard? You know what the golden handcuff effect is, right? Like the homeowners won't sell because they have a 2%, 3% rate.
Yeah. I read a study recently that said 20% of all of our inventory that we have right now is completely off the market. There are 20% of the people are going to hold on to those threes. They're going to be responsible with them, and come hell or high water, they're staying in that house, in spite of the fact that they might even want to move. But I think what we're also seeing happening at the same time is, listen, man, we are consumers in this country. At the end of the day, we are consumers. When we first started seeing 7 and 8s, and these people are sitting on the 2s and the 3s, they're saying, no way in hell would I go to a 7 or an 8. Well, let me tell you why that's not going to happen. As we sit here right now, me and you, there's some 55-year-old guy who's going out and buying a $120,000 2023 Corvette that he can't afford, and he's financing at a rate of 19% because, damn it, he deserves it. We are a nation of consumers. We know we spend. We've now got $1.13 trillion in revolving debt, the highest we've ever had. So we are consumers. We are going to come off that fence. We're going to lose 20%. But I'll tell you what, when it comes, the 3% rates, that's what artificially caused the problem that we're in right now, is what the Fed's actions were during the whole COVID meltdown, when we were handing out money like it was nothing. Like, my kid did not need to get 3 new monitors and a new CPU and a new computer and everything else because we had a virus. Like, that was unnecessary. And the 3% rates were kind of a part of that whole thing. And it's created a whole bunch of problems since then. The metrics that we would traditionally use to predict what is going to happen in the future in real estate, we can no longer rely on those, because the Fed created an artificial market. And what they're doing right now is they're trying to create another artificial market to offset that. I want you to think about this for a minute. Higher interest rates are the greatest thing that can happen right now to the housing market. Now, to let people know here, there's 2 ways that rates rise. So you have the Fed fund rate. The Fed fund rate is going to raise all interest except for mortgages. Doesn't affect mortgages at all, People hear when rates are going up, rates are going down. When you hear rates are going up, most of those days rates go down. That has nothing to do with each other, but it does affect your credit cards. It does affect what you're going to finance: a mattress, an air conditioner, or an entertainment center, whatever else you're buying. It's going to affect those rates. So we've got record high levels of debt right now, and when the feds are raising rates on that record $1.12 trillion in debt that we have, it's making that house payment more unsustainable, isn't it? So we're sitting on a 3% interest rate, but man, I've racked up a bunch of debt since I got that. And I could eventually find myself in a situation to where I can no longer even do a debt consolidation refinance on that property. But if I can, I lose that 3% rate. I refinance at a 7 or, a high mid 7 today, but I consolidate that 29 and 30% revolving debt that I have, and my overall monthly output of cash actually goes down. I think it's by design. And then, of course, what we have is the Fed balance sheet. And the Fed simultaneously, as they were raising rates, were dropping their balance sheet, and they weren't buying mortgage-backed securities in the numbers that they have in years past, and that's forced interest rates to go up as well. If we make this uncomfortable enough, we can actually get people out of those 3% loans. And I'll tell you, I think that the powers that be are looking at this. They're saying, oh my God, we killed the golden goose, which is the United States housing market, 25% of the GDP. And they're saying right now, we need to do something about it. So let's make their living as uncomfortable as humanly possible to get them out of those loans. But yeah, the 3% rates are a massive problem. They were when we did them. I knew it when we did them. And I think what's happening is we aren't talking about it because it would be political suicide for any politician. But I think that we have a national policy right now to try to get rid of them.
That's such a great answer, man. And I tell my viewers constantly, Brian, like the reason why we have unaffordability is the low interest rates, not the high interest rates. And also the high interest rates, a strong economy can thrive in high interest rates. The economy is, when they're low interest rates, is stimulated. And quite frankly, we know now, and at the time, they put too much stimulus. And they locked us down. So the growth of inventory was killed. Demand sat blowing up. Interest rates were in the 2% as well. The people are like 3s, but my interest rate is 2%. And I just love it how you also told the viewers, and again, I always try to talk about this, the federal funds rate over the last 6 months, okay, the interest rates that the Federal Reserve is controlling, the federal funds rate has gone down 0 times. The 30-year fixed rate mortgage has dropped 100 basis points. So on my channel, we have people watch the 10-year, the longer end of the yields, watch all of that. But also just to add to the point you were making as far as the golden handcuff effect kind of chiseling away, we see that in the data with cash out refinances. And when we dig into the data even more deeply, like if you go to Black Knight and you look at why people are refinancing, Brian, you probably look at this. People are cash out refinancing. They're not rate in term because there is no rate in term. So the average person is taking out $100,000 and going up almost 3% on their rate. And I try to tell people, I get it. When you have to do the debt consolidation, your monthly output is lower, but you've just wrapped up that debt into a 30-year loan that's an asset. It's your house. Whereas you could just buckle down, cancel your subscriptions, don't go out to eat as much, and have your credit card paid off in 3 months. Yeah. So I see it happening, man. I mean, because they're replacing that low mortgage payment with what? You just said it, a car loan. Like, oh, my mortgage is $1,000 less than everyone else's. You know what I'm going to do now? You know what I'm going to do? Because I'm the king, Brian. I made a good decision. I'm going to go get that Mercedes I've been wanting.
Man, we're consumers, dude. We are consumers. If you go back, so when I was writing loans back in the 90s, right? When I was, I'm not trying to be that old codger over here, but hear me out. It's interesting. It's like that people said subprime loans caused a housing crash. I'm like, no, they didn't. Subprime loans didn't cause a housing crash. Kawasaki did. Sea-Doo caused the housing crash. Sony caused the housing crash. Because here's what happened. We did the same thing. People got all this equity. They bought a whole bunch of crap they couldn't afford. They were wave runners, Sea-Doos, motorcycles, toy haulers, entertainment centers. And then what happened was they got too much debt. They had to go out of their good loan. They did a subprime loan so they could get a cash debt consolidation refinance, paid everything off, put it in their mortgage because they got all this newfound equity. You know what their credit card companies did? They said, hey, man, you're a good risk. I'm going to double your limit. Now they're thinking, I've got all this like free room right now. I don't, I've got a lot of extra cash. They're upping my limits. Clearly, I'm doing something good. Let's go back down to Kawasaki and get a couple of quad.
That is 100%. And not only that, Brian, then they would do refinance in 8 months. Yeah. Home buyers were just going, and I love that. Because
Yep.
I've been telling people like, yeah, it's a subprime. I'm like, the subprime helped the market, but the reason why the market crashed last time is people stopped making their payments.
Yeah.
And then if you want to go, well, why did they stop making their payments? What you just said there, if we want to take it even further, we crashed last time because of people's bad spending habits, and the
Yep.
regulation was so loose where they just, bad spending habits, no problem. Come, we love you. We love you. This is how economy works. This is how you think people get rich off of your bad spending habits. And so now I see the same thing. Only instead of back then, they were going out of a 6% into a 5%.
Yeah.
But right now, people are going from a 2% into a 7%.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Now let's move on to the next thing. I want to get your opinion on new homes versus existing, and I want to throw out some data. You may know this already, but for the viewers, new homes, when we look at median sales price, when we look at the peak back in October of 2022, new home sales prices, median sales prices down 16.8%. Year over year, 13 median, 14 for average. During the GFC, home prices for new homes went down 21. So right now we see bad things happening with new homes, but we also see, like your point, inventory at 6 months or more for 2 years.
Yeah.
A sustained six. So new homes have had inventory 6 months or more, 2 years, prices are going down. Existing homes rebounded this year. According to Redfin, existing homes actually rebounded 4%. So we have new homes down 16 from peak. We have new existing up 4% year over year. Why? Why do you think that is?
What? Give me the numbers one more time.
It's why do you think that we have that type of price decline for new homes on a nationwide average, but on a nationwide average for existing homes, it appears as if everything's fine, 4% growth. We've hit our soft landing. What is it? Why do you think the discrepancy from new homes versus existing home data?
Boy, that's a really, really good question. I personally, I think from my limited perspective where I live, I think people prefer living in older, more developed areas. When you look at any community, it's going to be the existing communities that I think are the more desirable communities. That's where they've had a chance to have your trees grow out more, more established schools, and I tend to think that that's part of it. I think that the desirability is going to be a huge issue. It could also be that new homes and builders, they probably had their finger on the pulse a little bit better than perhaps some of our real estate communities, and they were priced higher than they should have been. So the correction that we're seeing right now is just a natural correction, getting them down to where they are. That and the thing is this: if you're going down by 3% or you're going down by 16%, all we're really doing is we're getting to our equilibrium. And so that's where the equilibrium is today. How we got there, probably higher prices, probably the fact that we've got more established communities. If people are going to move, especially now, if I'm going to lose that 3 and I'm going to go to a 6, I'm going to get into the house that I want to get into. And that one's probably going to be an established community.
Okay, I thought you were gonna. I thought you were gonna take, because I accidentally gave you an answer that I think, which is the inventory. It's the inventory, and then plus a lot of that new home building is on the outskirts of metros where people don't want to drive an hour, and then also, like you said, essentially there's more margin for them to reduce prices. They're forced to sell, whereas existing you don't have that same ability unless you purchase prior to 2022. So, and I like how you mentioned, and we're going to take us to the end here. Basically, you use the word, I think, price discovery or price correction. And that's something that, other than new homes, we haven't really seen price discovery on a nationwide average. I attribute that to a lack of inventory, but buying demand being a little bit higher than that lack of inventory, just a little bit higher than that lack of inventory. So, I think we're due price discovery, Brian, but let me ask you this question, okay?
Sure.
Talking about price discovery and ending us out here, do you think on a nationwide average that we're going to continue to have a decline in prices? And overall, do you believe, and maybe you could talk as much as you feel comfortable, do you believe that the housing market, by your definition, will crash?
So by the way, to the last one, I want to add this one point to it real quickly. I think investors too, especially when you saw like what the open doors of the world started doing, and they were finding massive hedge funds who were buying houses and using them as rentals. I think investors has a lot to do with what those numbers we see doing existing. Easier to go buy the new homes. They're going to require less maintenance, less invest in things and turn them into rentals. So that's probably that's probably the biggest part of it. Do I think we're going to have a crash? Boy. I kind of do. I kind of do. But there are so many variables at play that we don't know what the outcomes are. Again, from all of the moves that the Fed did, they created an artificial market that we can no longer look at our metrics, our reliable metrics that we've used for decades, and say, yeah, this is a direction the market is going. Everybody knows, like when the Fed makes a statement, the market is already corrected for that before the Fed even says what they're going to do. So there's a certain
Yeah.
amount of predictability that we've always had in real estate, and we don't have that now. It's kind of the Wild West. And I do think that we're going to see something that's going to drive prices down
And
significantly.
what do you think that is, Brian?
Okay, here's the reason why. Because I think prices are artificially higher than where they need to be, where they should be right now, in a big way. So if you have 50% of the country who owns a home, okay, 50% of the country who doesn't own a home, not right numbers, but just for our purposes, let's just assume that to be the case. 50% of the country never expected to get these enormous increases in equity. They beat everybody's expectations where we're sitting right now. And people want to hold on to that equity as if it's real money and it's theirs. Everybody who's making policy decisions right now, in the run up to where we're at right now, they all own homes and they want to hold on to that equity. These huge hedge funds who are buying all the new homes, who are turning zoned lands from single family into apartment complex areas, who own massive, hundreds of thousands of properties across the United States. They have a vested interest in keeping prices as high as they possibly can be. And I think what we've done is we've been pushing so hard to hold on to the artificial equity that we have right now that is inevitably and invariably going to snap. I do think it's going to go down. I do think we're going to see a correction. I do think it's going to be significant. Nothing like we saw in 2008. But yeah, I think what's going to happen is I think we'll see. Again, I'm way out, in the deep end of the pool on this one. I got way over the tips of my skis type of thing, whatever you want to say. But I think we're going to see a 20 to 30% correction in home prices. And by the way, it will be the best thing that could possibly happen to not only this industry, but to the country. It's much
I agree.
needed. What we're doing right now is so dysfunctional. It's unbelievable.
So it's interesting, and I have one more last question for you.
Sure.
Basically, because I'm listening to your specificity here, you're basically saying that we can have a 20 to 30% price correction, which, by the way, exceeds the GFC, so it would actually be twice as strong as the GFC, but yet not necessarily have an extreme systemic failure like we had during the GFC. The reason being is because of how artificially inflated the price of houses are. Is that pretty good summary of what you're saying?
Yeah. Whenever I've done a lot of speaking around the country and traveled, and everywhere I go, I try to put together a different presentation, and I try to modify it for the area that I'm in. So I always do a little research and look into it. And one of the things I've always looked at, and I've done this consistently for over a decade, is I always look at could a civil servant buy a house in the community that they service? That's always that was the thing.
No,
right?
The answer is no.
Well, you know what? When I started it, you couldn't in San Francisco, and they're getting kicked in the teeth right now. You couldn't in New York, and they're getting kicked in the teeth right now, as they should. Way too expensive. But when you went to what they would call flyover states, when you would get to the Midwest and North Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, you could. But the truth is, I remember the day that Bismarck, North Dakota, where the median sales price house could not be purchased by a civil servant working in that community. And I said, boy, we're really up against a wall. The truth is, this is so wildly unsustainable and wildly unhealthy. There has to be a correction.
All right. Last question now. And I know that, your channel is kind of more dedicated to the professionals in the industry, but I just think that's so valuable for everyday consumers. Brian, can you, and we'll end this now, but on this question, and take as long as you want to answer it. We're running out of time though, but what do you, in your expertise being in the business for 30 years, training all kinds of individuals, what do you think most consumers should be doing right now? And I say that because a lot of them are bitter, resentful, giving up hope. What should consumers do right now, Brian, to get ahead in the future?
These are the typical talking points that you're going to hear from every real estate agent and every lender. But it's true. It's the whole Gene Autry thing, invest in real estate because they're not making it anymore. I mean, it's always going to be, it always has been historically the one thing that you can bank on or bet on. But the thing about real estate that's different is it's not just an investment. It becomes the fabric of your life. It does.
Mhm.
So you have to put a price on that. Not to get too mushy about this, but it's true. I mean, I think back on my life, and I literally still dream about a house I lived in Southern California 40 years ago. I've got and all these memories that we build up. And I think, but especially as a parent, I mean, you're a parent of 4, I'm a parent of 3. And all of, our memories are so tied to the places we live and the neighbors we have and the communities that we're, and the schools that we go to. So it's not just an investment. It's so much more than that. But specifically as it pertains to an investment, it's always been a really strong one. And what we can't lose sight of is what your house payment is going to be today is going to be the highest you're ever going to pay, provided you're responsible with what you're purchasing. So you're going to buy at a rate that's going to probably be fixed or, maybe a 3 or 5, but we know rates are going to come down. And so buying that house today is you're going to be able to do a refinance, a rate and term refinance and lower that payment. As inflation goes up over the year, that and your income goes up, that payment also incrementally goes down as a percentage of what we don't know all the talking points, but they all happen to be true. So real estate, yes, it always goes up over a long enough period of time, so it's a good investment. You have your family and yourself tied into these memories. That's hugely important, and we can't put a number on that. And if you take the purchase and the responsibility seriously, your payment and the percentage of what you have and what you make will only go down. So I would say buy today if you find the right house. Buy at the 7s. It's okay. Buy at the 8s. Everyone hears this. It's so ungodly overused, but you marry the house, you date the rate. You hear that a ton.
Yeah. So, and the only thing, man, that is, so to add to your point, yes, when we look at the historical trends of and we don't have a lot because usually home prices don't go down. That's abnormal. The Fed got involved. Is basically real estate comes up. So I think what you're saying is have the right expectations, even if real estate values go down temporarily. Eventually it should go up, and as long as you position yourself to take home ownership seriously, you should be okay. My only worry about when people say you can refinance later is they don't. And I just dropped the F-bomb, so this is my take too. Is if they don't got no equity, they can't do no refinance. So if these people purchased at the peak in listening to a realtor expecting to refinance in 1 year, it may take 3-4 years for people to get enough equity to be able to refinance into a lower rate. And that's if they weren't late on anything. The moment, as as a loan officer, the moment they're late on a credit card, car, or anything of that nature, the score could go down 80 to 100 points. So I think if they are going to plan on refinancing later, they need to understand what that could potentially look like. And even if they're upside down, they could potentially still refinance. But a lot of times, if they are upside down, they got to bring the money to the table. So just there's just so much to cover, Brian. I really appreciate your time, brother. I'm going to get us out of here. I got to pretty much wrap it up. Do you have any closing statement you want to give before I exit?
Yeah. Listen, if you're going to buy a house right now, lay off the Uber Eats. I mean, it's too expensive anyway. I can't afford a 26% tip right now and 7.5% taxes on an $18 hamburger. Lay off the Uber Eats, man. You'll be fine.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know what? And I mean, I tell people all the time, and if you are going to buy right now, I also like to add cash flow, a wedge, obviously, but it starts because people all the time ask me, Brian, when is it going to get more affordable? When's it going to get more affordable? And I'm like, okay, well, let's start location. Okay. Payment, price in that order. And then, but the most important thing is your affordability is different than my affordability. I would still be personally hyper cautious, the refinancing, but I mean, dude, it starts with empowerment. Let's be honest. I mean, there's different people, different markets, different reasons to buy. There's no way that we can uniform this. We can't. People are different. Don't forget, go over to his channel, the National Real Estate Post. Go there, comment on his videos, let him know that, Real Estate Mindset sent you. I think this guy has an overwhelming amount of insight. I definitely appreciate your perspective, Brian. I'm going to get us out of here. Keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm trying to catch up to you. 15 years. I've only doing this about 2 years next month. So this is crazy. The influencing and doing videos is crazy, man. So my hat's off to you. Salute you, sir. And if you guys are out there investing in real estate, we wish you luck and we hope you win.